news. How is it in the first place you've come to be torn? Come sit, come tell me. We will find a way to mend you. This morning we will be hearing from Reverend Charlie. His topic is social healing. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning. It's good to be here. Last week, I ended my sermon with these words: we must offer a chance for others' redemption, forgiving others as we would want to be forgiven. Forgiveness does not mean that all people face no consequences for their behavior. It simply means that we do not forget the humanity of our enemies. Love seeks what is best for all. Spread love, not fear. Build upon the strength of love. This will promote healing. Let us exercise our compassion so that we may have the strength to love. This week, I say, easier said than done. Can there be forgiveness without repentance? Should people who put immigrant kids in cages be allowed to make public policy again? Should people who profited from corruption be allowed to walk away without being investigated? Easy forgiveness of perpetrators does real harm to the victims. Healing requires a reckoning. And we are a nation with many deep wounds. Our theology influences how we respond. Dominionist Christians emphasize the dominion of God, God's power to punish people for their sins. Somebody's got to pay. Liberal Christianity emphasizes God's love and mercy. Our Universalist heritage states that there is no hell and that all will be reconciled to God. Now, this causes some emotional dissonance. Everyone enjoys the idea of going to heaven, but when we're honest with ourselves, we have a short list of people that we probably would love to see burn in hell. Universalism has a conundrum, and you have to face it. If universalism means that even Hitler is reconciled to God, that's pretty bad. It feels bad. But the flip side of that is non-universalism says that Gandhi is burning in hell. And so that struggle of acceptance and redemption and drawing lines, saying who's in and who's out, is a real struggle. And wherever you land on that spectrum. And this was a struggle for the 18th and 19th century Universalists. Peter Hughes wrote an article on what was called the Restorationist Controversy for the Unitarian Universalist Dictionary of Biography. In it he writes, Universalists in the late 18th century New England were not in theological accord regarding the afterlife. Some, like Caleb Rich, believed that the soul would experience immediate salvation upon death. These held that the consequences of sins would be limited to life on earth. The majority of Universalists, like Charles Chauncey and Elihan Winchester, believed that the soul would be disciplined or educated for a period after death. After a finite, though perhaps very long period, the soul would be ready for eternal holiness and happiness. In the 1810s, Jose Ballou and Edward Turner were the two leading Universalist ministers and also close friends. Ballou had long doubted future punishment. He represented the ultra-Universalists. Turner had devoted some effort to convincing him of the truth of some punishment after death. He represented the Restorationists. Restorationist controversy was a contest between two evangelical strategies. Ballou asked Universalists to emphasize their uniqueness and difference between Universalists and all other churches. Ballou constantly attacked the Orthodox, among whom he included the Unitarians at the time, often with biting humor and sarcasm. Restorationists urged a more conciliatory and ecumenical approach. They hoped to attract to Universalism membership people who might easily become Congregationalists, Baptists, or Methodists, or Presbyterians. According to the Restorationist appeal, only the doctrine of universal salvation made Universalists distinctive, and their version of the doctrine preserved, these are the words of Peter Hughes, the necessary inducement of future punishment to morality. In their version, punishment, though it might be very long, was not eternal. In the end, God's love would prevail universally. In reading Ballou, I found that he did not believe that future punishment was necessary to control behavior, because he believed that fear of God was not the same as love. And he would argue that if you are only good because you fear God, that he was going to watch you real closely, because you ought to be good for the sake of having empathy and compassion and responding to the love of God. He said, "There is nothing in heaven above or earth beneath that can do away with sin but love." Well, I tend to agree about heaven above. God, if God exists, is all-powerful. After death, God has the power to transform sinners, teach them the error of their ways, and teach them how to be embraced by eternal love. But on earth, God does not appear to be changing the hearts of evil people. Evil people refuse to see the evidence of their wrongdoing. They lawyer up. On earth, humans, with their imperfect ability to love and transform, need to impose some consequence upon wrongdoers. Some can learn no other way. Even after conviction, many will claim their innocence. These people without empathy or realization of the harm that they do need to be imprisoned, separated from the rest of society. And think about the words we use to house criminals. The word prison comes from the Latin prehensio, which means to seize. It simply means that the person is captured. In the 19th century, liberalism, a new word emerged called penitentiary, coming from the word repent. It meant that holding a criminal separate in a facility that would allow them to see the error of their ways and guide them towards repentance so that they could rejoin society. A less religious term today is correctional facility. A prison is for punishment. A penitentiary hopes for redemption and reconciliation. Of course, now the words are used interchangeably, and it seems mostly, whatever the institution is called, that punishment seems to be the purpose. How do we as a society teach lessons to those who are antisocial? Do we kill them with kindness so they change from within? Or do we change their behavior by making them fear punishment? I mean, do we really care why someone chooses not to abuse us? Their transformation to a loving person is preferable, but I'll settle for them just being out of my life. Our criminal justice system focuses on the criminal and not the victim. It is a punitive system. A person gets robbed and the robber goes to jail. The victim gets no compensation. In fact, the victim is left out of the process. In court, the case is labeled the state versus whomever the alleged criminal is. The criminal system is about punitive justice. We have a separate court system in this country, the civil court system, which is geared towards compensatory justice. The victim gets paid by the perpetrator. Some processes work towards a form of reconciliation or restorative justice. Divorce has traditionally been a civil suit, an adversarial process where one party wins and the other party pays. Seldom do both parties believe that justice has been served. But in recent years, there's been the thought of no-fault divorce, and more divorces go through the process of mediation, especially in cases where children are involved. The couple need to redefine their relationship and look for ways that they can cooperate after the divorce. They reconcile, at least for the task of co-parenting. Some forgiveness needs to occur in order for their lives to continue separate but still together. This is a form of the restorative process. But sometimes forgiveness is too much to ask. Forgiveness without reckoning perpetuates abuse. When a mother whose unarmed son has been executed by the police, we often see her on TV a few days later saying that her faith requires her to forgive. And then the perpetrator is often acquitted, or no criminal charges are brought at all. And then the process repeats, because no one was held accountable. This is a difficult story. It's difficult to tell, and it may be difficult for many of you to hear. But I know of a girl who was molested by a member of her church. She was 13. Instead of calling the police, her parents called the minister. And the minister convened a meeting. The perpetrator confessed his sins and begged for forgiveness. Then the minister turned to the girl and told her that it was her Christian duty to forgive. And then she spent her whole high school years going to church, seeing this man. And no one was to speak of what he had done. It was a secret kept between the minister, the man, the parents, and the child. Her dignity was sacrificed to preserve the standing of the perpetrator. It's no surprise that at 17 she married the first loser to come along to get out of that house. A political example is after apartheid fell in South Africa. The nation couldn't simply pretend that nothing had happened. Anglican Bishop Desmond Tutu set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Of this, he wrote, "There is no peace in Southern Africa. There is no peace because there is no justice. There can be no real peace and security until there first be justice enjoyed by all the inhabitants of that beautiful land. The Bible knows nothing about peace without justice, for that would be crying, 'Peace, peace,' when there is no peace. God's shalom, peace, involves inevitably righteousness, justice, wholeness, fullness of compassion, sharing, and reconciliation. Forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or our loved ones is not about pretending that things are other than they are. It is not about patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end it is worthwhile, because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing. The process went forward in South Africa. The commission found that more than 19,000 people had been victims of gross human rights violations, and an additional 3,000 victims were identified through the confessions of other people. In reporting these numbers, the commission voiced its regret that there was very little overlap of the victims between those seeking restitution and those seeking amnesty. In other words, there were not a lot of people in the process. Most of the people who talked about being victimized did not have their actual personal perpetrator come forward and confess. And some people came forward and confessed, but their victim was never heard from. There were amnesty applications. Most of them were refused. Only about 10% of people who confessed were given amnesty. So there was still a legal process that went through for those who confessed. And so on a personal level, I think many people were unsatisfied. But on a national level, more important than the numbers, was the feeling that truth had been told. Those who did not want to come forward and relive their abuse by testifying knew that others spoke for them. And those who were too scared to come forward and face the consequences of their crimes knew that it was wrong because so many of their peers came forward. There was a feeling that the truth had been told. The results are uneven and debatable, but the results in South Africa were better than in Zimbabwe, where blacks were just required or had told to just take land from white farmers without any legal process whatsoever, which just led to a lot of bloodshed and people on the land who then had no training of how to work the land, and poverty was expanded in that nation. Our neighbors to the north, Canada, held a truth and reconciliation process related to residential schools for Indigenous Canadians. It brought to light the history of kidnapping children and bringing them into these schools under the pretense of civilizing them. Many of the children were sexually abused. In 2015, after hearing from many people, the Commission made 94 calls for action. According to the Canadian Broadcast Corporation's webpage, Beyond 94, only 10 of these recommendations have been completed, and 24 have not been started. And the rest are in process, and it will be a long process. The U.S. had a much smaller process in admitting wrongdoing of imprisoning Japanese citizens during World War II. In the 1970s, Jimmy Carter started an investigation, and by 1988, Ronald Reagan signed into a law an act that gave every survivor of the camps around $20,000, which is much less than what was stolen during that 4-year period. But at least there was a process. But then that raised the question of how much African Americans and Native Americans are owed for centuries of abuse. How do we pay for the wrongs done by our government? It is our tradition for presidents not to prosecute their predecessors. Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, although many people in his administration did serve jail times. When Obama was elected, he did not investigate the torture that occurred under the George W. Bush administration. He said we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards. As a result, by 2018, Gina Haspel was nominated as a CIA director. She ran dark sites where torture was done, and she had a primary role in destroying documentation of the torture that occurred. Because she was not dealt with in 2010, she now heads this nation's intelligence service. And that's an appointment that's not a political appointment. That one will probably continue into the next administration. Now, of course, if Obama had investigated, he would have been accused of persecuting Americans' heroes who kept us safe after 9/11. He had enough trouble trying to give people health care. He wouldn't have a chance running those prosecutions. In that case, in our history, political consideration outweighed justice. And we've had the kids on the border. What are we going to do about that? And then there's just the rhetoric. How do we... It's not really against the law to say nasty things about lots of people, but it still does real harm. How is we of a nation going to correct that? No matter who we voted for, we as a nation are responsible for what our nation does. So how do we proceed? On October 20th, economist Robert Wright tweeted about the necessity of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And there was immediate pushback from the right, accusing him of fascism and McCarthyism. We are so divided that truth and facts and science are considered a leftist conspiracy. Calls for unity are rejected. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Our national security and law enforcement agencies are in shambles. The left decries an attorney general who targets political enemies. And when the left is in power, even legitimate investigations will be accused of being retaliatory and vindictive and political. But where laws have been broken, charges should be filed. If bullies have no consequences, they will bully again. We can respect their humanity, but we cannot tolerate their misbehavior. We should invite the UN to investigate the human rights violations on the border and subject ourselves to the opinion of the world of our immigration policy and our refusal to take refugees. And some of the problems that have been revealed are bigger than any president. The genocide of Native Americans, the exploitation of immigrants, the subjugation of African Americans have been ignored for too long. And when this pandemic hit the country, we saw all the inequities in our healthcare system and our housing system and our distribution of healthcare. We need to find a way to face our past, because a whitewashed past threatens our future. But how do we re-educate those who face the truth? When I hear the word re-educate, it brings to mind Soviet camps that were made to re-educate dissidents. I don't want that happening in America. We need to present issues in a way that gives people the chance to change. And this process will take a long, long time. The crisis of the present makes it hard to review the past and predict the future. Robert Wright writes, "But the responsibility for healing America falls to all of us. For starters, we do well to recognize and honor the selflessness we have observed during this trying time, starting with the tens of thousands of election workers who have worked long hours under difficult and sometimes dangerous circumstances. Add to them the hospital workers across the nation saving lives from the scourge of COVID-19, the thousands of firefighters in the West, the emergency responders in the Gulf battling the consequences of climate change, civil servants getting unemployment checks out to millions of jobless Americans, social workers dealing with family crises in the wake of evictions and other hardships, and armies of volunteers doling out food from soup kitchens. These are the true heroes of America. They embody the decency of this land. They are doing the healing, rebuilding the trust, reminding us who we are and who we are not." To sum up, there are three types of justice that I've talked about in this sermon: punitive, compensatory, and restorative. Punitive has its role, but I think it should be reserved for leaders and people who have done things that are illegal. That's where we have a system in place, imperfect as it is. Compensatory is very difficult. It needs to be done by changing some of the policies of this nation. We have seen the poor, the sick, and businesses, medical staffs, religious minorities like Muslims and Jews be horribly mistreated during these past 4 years, where people were given permission to share their bigotry and disdain. We need to find a way as a society to give real and tangible benefits to people who have been harmed by our society. And then there's restorative justice. And this is the justice that's most available to us. With our co-workers, our friends and families, and even strangers in the parking lot who have bumper stickers that are scary. How do we form human relationships that are real, that shows people who are the enemy? How do we love the enemy in a way that transforms them into friends? This is the deepest type of spiritual effort. It requires looking at our own hatred and prejudices. It requires us to find our safe space where we are protected, that we can retreat to when this work gets too difficult. Restorative justice is about relationship. We'll never get through this pandemic if one half of the country doesn't trust the vaccine that they perceive coming from a political rival. And that's where we are. Even if science comes up with the best vaccine, There are so many people who do not trust the political process or science enough to take the vaccine in sufficient amount of people for this disease to actually be curtailed. So we need to work with each other on a real and personal ability. You know, being as left as I am, I need to work with people who are even farther left than me, who distrust any authority, and the moderates. Those of you who are moderates have to work on me and the people who are center-right. And those who are center-right need to work with the far-right and the moderates. Have conversations with the people who are closest to you, who is safe enough to try to widen the circle of trust. And ask them to widen the circle of trust wherever they are situated. This is the task of justice. This is the task of redemption. This is the task of restorative justice. May we bless and be blessed.